It's not often that we get Welsh rock and roll royalty into the studio live, but it's happening this morning. James and Nicky from the Manic Street Preachers are here with us this morning. Gentlemen, good morning. You are Welsh rock and roll royalty. In fact, you are the godfathers. What an extraordinary...
Making us feel old already.
We're old enough to be godfathers, definitely.
I remember meeting you years and years and years ago when you were just... Well, we were all starting out, I suppose, and it's incredible all these years on just to think that, well, you're still all together for a start.
I think the fact that we're still friends, the three of us, that's a pretty amazing achievement in itself. You know, the fact that we still call each other every day and talk about the same old rubbish, you know, that in itself. The fact that we still think we're making kind of good music and meaning something and being relevant to people is even better.
It's an extraordinary tribute to the friendship, though, because loads of people start as friends in a band and then it explodes somehow, it goes wrong.
I mean, kind of there is, and, you know, obviously kind of... you know, rock and roll bands are notorious for splitting up for the most kind of like trivial of reasons. You know, whether it be kind of over stealing each other's narcotics or kind of like
wives
or whatever. And kind of like we're very much more boring than that. So those things were never going to happen. But I think, you know, some bands actually only meet each other when they actually try to form a band, whereas we've known each other since we were like 4 years old. So we kind of just knew each other before people, you know, through playing sport with each other, by going to the school disco with each other, by going to the same school with each other,
by failing to get girlfriends together.
You know, all those things. We knew each other. We knew each other on that level before we ever became bandmates, I suppose.
You look back now, 38 singles. The Beatles only released, what was it, 22 during... I mean, it has been the most extraordinary career when you look at it in those terms.
Generally, we are proud of it. You know, it's not very often we say stuff like that, but to get to that point of starting off releasing cassette singles and ending up, you know, when it's just a virtual digital universe, seems a pretty insane thought when I look back at our catalogue and I get all our archive out and I'm looking at these mad little cassette singles. It literally would make no sense at all now to a 15-year-old.
One of the only bands that straddle kind of like the era of Betamax to the download.
But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, for a band who originally said that you wanted to release one double album and then split up. And I remember that interview in the very early days. Who'd have thought after all this time?
Yeah, well, I think myself and Richey were, you know, incredibly interested in saying stuff and manifestos and being slightly controversial just to separate us. And sometimes when we'd say those things, me and him, about, you know, we're going to split up, I could see James and Sean slightly cringing, thinking, you know, we're really good musicians, we want to grow and make records for the rest of our life. And then there's these two saying we're going to split up.
Sometimes interviews for myself and Sean were like band meetings. We would find out what the future held for us.
I mean, there is an irony to the whole thing, isn't there? That the Manics of 1991 would have hated the idea of still being around in 20 years and having such a well-known back catalogue.
I suppose kind of like there was a part of us that wanted to be like a, you know, like a kind of firework in the sky, just burning brightly, and all those kind of romantic notions of just leaving something perfect. But I think in the back of our minds, we're also fans of bands like The Clash and stuff, where kind of we saw that they developed over the course of like 5 or 6 albums, and they kind of mutated and changed into something. I think in the back of our minds, we always wanted to kind of like perhaps emulate The Clash as well as the Sex Pistols. We wanted everything, basically.
Yeah.
And why a greatest hits album now? Because it's not the first one, is it? You released Forever Delayed in 2003.
Yeah. I think it's nearly 10 years since then, and that album was much more cherry-picked, in all honesty. There was only 19 of the singles on there. This time, it just feels like a clearing of the decks. You know, we did our 10th album last year, Postcards, and, you know, that did really well. And I think to move on, if we're going to move on and to the final phase of the band and try and reinvent ourselves one more time, it's just felt like a really nice opportunity to clear the path.
And the album ties in with this big one-off show at the O2 Arena in December, which sounds like the most incredible event.
It sounds incredible for everyone else. We're starting to worry a bit about actually playing it, because 38 songs is, especially for James's vocal cords and Sean's drumming hands, it's going to be a hard task. But
It's going to be playing for about 4 hours, I think, and so
that's 3.
Yeah, I reckon with the gaps.
Oh, have you got some plans?
And oxygen breaks. I think it's going to be about 4. But kind of, yeah, it's kind of, I might have to take a dose of some kind of Olympic banned substance, kind of like before I do the concert. It's going to be lots of kind of costume changes for Nick, and perhaps I might have to toy with the fact that I'm going to have a video prompter by the side of me because I might forget all.
You're getting old now, mate. I mean, it's
42,
not easy.
there's no denying it.
It's not easy to remember all the words.
That is a lot of words, I can tell you.
You look in good shape. I mean, you're obviously looking after yourselves. I mean, you contradict the usual sort of stereotype of aging rock and rollers living dangerously.
Yeah, I think we just realise at a certain point in your life, you literally, well, I'm certainly not strong enough to mix the two. I've had to give up alcohol, which pains me deeply because I do miss it. But
you can just watch the others drink now.
What's that?
You can just watch the others.
Well, I
drink.
never drink until
James can't drink anymore. So
I only ever drink when I go to when I go to the rugby or I go to see football. I don't kind of associate drink with rock and roll anymore. I associate it with sport thing. Look, the idea of getting on stage with a hangover and doing an hour and 45 set is just pure hell now. It just is. Sorry, kids, that's the truth.
What about the rugby? We've got to talk about the rugby because you're fanatical rugby fans. Are you enjoying it? Are your fingernails bitten down?
It's really strange. I mean, the first, South Africa match did not enjoy. Kind of
only because it was pure heartbreak.
It was just, and it just nearly headbutted myself into extinction. I just couldn't believe that we lost by a point at the end, and just cursing Wayne Barnes, not going to the kind of like to the video ref, and the Samoan game was just pure hell to watch as well. The results are good, they're enjoyable, but actual watching the games has just been so nerve-wracking. Because I think we're aware of this history of losing against Western Samoa and losing against Fiji and having this pretty bad record against South Africa. But in reality, it's gone well. So I take the results over the enjoyment anytime.
This is a difficult question. Out of the 38 songs, you must have a favourite. Out of all of them, if you had to name a favourite, what would it be?
I think for longevity and just for the ultimate reinvention, it probably has to be Design for Life for me, just because it's a moment when all the kind of things we grew up with, the kind of working class nature of South Wales, the education, the idea of sort of self-help and sort of moving yourself on, along with an amazing tune, just kind of forged. I think I always think of it as the sound of South Wales, really. I think Design for Life has a pretty unique quality like that.
James, what about you?
I mean, I was going to say Design for Life because I suppose it stands for one of those pivotal moments where kind of, we might not been in existence, if it hadn't been for that song, because we needed something to take us forward from what had happened with Richey. We needed people to actually believe in us as a band without him, I suppose. So that song does stand for all those things.
And out of all of these songs, I mean, there must be one that you hate playing as well. Which is it?
Oh, that's a rich vein. Well, there are some songs that we've been practicing for the O2 concert. There are songs like Love Sweet Axel, There by the Grace of God.
So I So Sad.
So I So Sad.
We haven't played them for 10, 15 years. And,
for very good reasons. So kind of like, there's always going to be runts in the litter which you're very confused about. You got to be honest about the fact that, sometimes you've written songs which perhaps turkeys.
Well, that's very honest. Tell me about rehearsals and preparing for a gig like this. I mean, as you say, it's an absolute marathon of music. I mean, just talk me through what sort of rehearsals and preparations you have to go through.
Well, we started a couple of weeks back, sort of properly, especially digging into the ones we hadn't done for a while, which was actually enjoyable in a sort of painful way.
Yeah.
Seeing if James could play a solo as fast as he could 20 years ago, like Eddie Van Halen.
It's kind of akin to watching us play in Samoa, kind of thing. You're going to get a result, but it's kind of, you got to go through the pain barrier. I suppose playing songs like Love Sweet Axel just reminds you of how young we were. And that's a nice shot in the arm. It makes you realise that we've got a history and that we've outlasted most of our peers. So there's strange ways of enjoying some of these songs that we haven't played for a while.
There's some lovely feelings about just being in a bedroom writing lyrics for Richey together, and doing videos together, and because they were incredibly exciting times for 4 kids, from a comprehensive school. in South Wales to be suddenly on the cover of the NME and, you know, travelling around the world. All those cliches were genuinely thrilling times. So it does bring back a lot of nice memories too.
You said recently in an interview, no reunions, no comebacks, no encores. It sounds awfully like a band who are calling it a day. Are you?
Well, the thing is, most of our peers have split up and reformed once or twice by now, so we haven't done that. We've only ever done one encore in our life.
In 22 years.
In 22 years, and we hated the experience so much that we never did it again.
Well, to be honest, we left it so long to come back on, because we didn't want to, that the crowd had gone. And there was about 3 shambling metalheads down the front at the marquee.
I think the statement kind of like just shows our persistence in kind of staying true to something more than showing what's going to happen in the future, I think.
I think it's the easy way out to split up. These days, it's a career move for a lot of kind of bands of our ilk. You know, they know that if you split up for 5 to 10 years, you come back and just make a lot of money. And you know, we've kind of enjoyed trudging through the misery as well as the good times. It's a Welsh thing.
Misery.
Well, misery. Yes, melancholia.
Yeah.
It's an important trait. It's why we're so realistic all the time. It's a good thing to have.
Tell me about your plans post-December.
I'll be lying down for a few weeks. Well, we've got our studio in Cardiff, which has been the greatest thing that has happened to us in the last 5 years, really, because it's just like a giant garden shed for men to potter around in, to watch telly, to listen to music, and to write new songs. And we won't be doing any more concerts in the UK for a while. We'll just be bunkering down and trying to reinvent ourselves again.
Yeah,
you know?
I think we've got to try and envisage a future without having any hits. If you actually look at the top, 40 now, it's pretty much all R&B and pop kind of thing, and it's almost like the indie wars were never fought. So we kind of like got to try and envisage a future where we indulge ourselves and make an album, which is go back to the art of just making an album without a single on, really, which sounds scary, and that's a scary thing for a band like us. And also we're throwing around the ideas of having perhaps another vocalist in the band.
Really?
Yeah,
and that's Jim's, not the rest
idea.
of us.
Shortlist names that you can give us, perhaps?
No, just perhaps something a bit more attractive for Nick and Sean to kind of look at.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, when you look back at all of your years, the landscape has changed so much in terms of the technology and the music business. I mean, it's almost unrecognisable now, isn't it?
It truly is. Yeah. I mean, when we started, we were paid by the record company to go and tour different countries. You were given tour support. You were supported. I mean, we didn't sell millions of albums till our 4th album. You just couldn't do that anymore. The pressure's on you straight away. We grew up in a tactile, analog age of cutting tape in studios, and to be in the kind of virtual anarchy that we are now, it's quite scary.
Richey never kind of downloaded anything.
He never had a mobile phone.
Never had a mobile phone. When we started, kind of like I'd never, before I came to London, I'd never bought a bottle of mineral water in my life. Just really trivial little things like that you realise,
When you look back over the last 20 years, I wonder what each of your personal highlights are. You must have some.
Yeah, I think it does vary from the small scale of just starting off in Motown Junk, staying in B&Bs, playing the provinces, going to Norway, travelling abroad for the first time. And then you move on to the scale of something like the Millennium Stadium. That was to get 60-odd thousand there. After saying we'd do it 10 years earlier, that was an amazing night that, you're never going to... actually caused a few problems, because after a high like that, you literally don't know where to go. So I think, and then maybe Your Love Alone's Not Enough, working with Nina from the Cardigans, who we absolutely adored as a lyricist and a singer, and to sort of have another massive hit, that was pretty impressive.
I just want to ask you about the low after that high. I mean, it must have been the most extraordinary experience for musicians like you on the world stage to stand in front of a sea of 60,000 people. I mean, it must be hell the following day.
I really did. I took a massive... I mean, that's why I started thinking about, let's go to Cuba and do a gig for, in front of Fidel Castro, because my mind was working in overdrive, thinking, how do you top it? Where do you go? What do you do? And James and Sean went to...
No, I was kind of... I stayed in the...
Happily hungover.
I stayed in the England house, sweating the Marriott for another 2 days, smashed out of my mind. Back in the days when I could. No, I kind of... I've got this little kind of a safety mechanism in my head which switches off, whereas for Nick, he hasn't got that kind of little kind of switch off button in his head. You know, sometimes I just can, and I assume that we could go on and do other things, whereas he just constantly worries in front of a bank of TVs at 4 o'clock in the morning in his den.
What about your personal highlight from the past 20 years? If you could pluck one.
I think it changes sometimes, but I think the first tour we ever did was amazing. Where we had just a hire van with all the gear in the back, and we were touring around Britain with Motown Junk, which is our first kind of like proper single release. You know, we were playing places like Manchester and Stoke and Glasgow and Edinburgh and you know, just places I'd never been to before. I'd never been abroad, let alone go to Stoke. You know, and that was a kind of great time because it was, as you would imagine that cliche to be, it was just completely true. You know, 4 guys going off in a van, scraping money together to buy a burger, you know, to survive on 1 meal a day. And it was great, you know, just playing in front of people that just completely just didn't know where we were from, you know, because we were completely out of step. But people were actually taking notice of us. So there was a kind of gang mentality at the start, the first tour we ever did, which was kind of romantic.
I think that going to Japan as well. I mean, when we first went to Japan and there was this Beatlemania, there was all these people at the airport when we turned up. And we literally, in unison, looked behind us to see if there was a famous band behind us. And we realised they were all waiting there for us. And we did this week-long residency, 3,000 people every night. James absolutely fell in love with Japan. And I don't know, it was a pretty...
You mean I just got smashed?
Well, yeah. You discovered Sapporo?
Yes, I did, yes.
But you did love it. You bought into the food straight. It's not like you'd had sushi before there.
No, it wasn't. No, not this boy. And no, that's true. That was a time where kind of we felt as if I'm never going to work again. Kind of moment, you know.
Men, it's lovely to see you.
Pleasure.
We wish you continued success and great happiness. I know you're off now to record some live tracks for Beth and Elvin's show. National Treasures is out on the 31st of October. Let's play out now with the current single, This Is the Day. My thanks this morning to Nicky and James Dean Bradfield. Good to see you.
Cheers, James.
Pleasure.